Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Furlong, and today we're going to be talking about genes and evolution. We know that our genes give us our phenotypes, but the question is what determines the number of phenotypes for any given trait? Sometimes there's only a few, sometimes there's a lot. Well, the quick answer is it depends on how many genes are controlling it. So let's start off with a simple one. Let's say that this is a trait that is only controlled by a single gene. Evolution can work on this type of phenotype because natural selection can lead to changes in the gene frequencies, which can then change the phenotypes. So let me explain this. Let's say that we have a population of mice, and there are three different phenotypes for fur color. There's the brown, there's white, and there's black. And let's start off with a population that is 80% brown fur, 10% white, 10% black. Now again, some of these traits might be more selective than others, which means that some will have a greater chance at surviving. So let's go ahead 10 generations. And by chance, the white mice are gone. Their population is down to 0%. The brown population stayed the same at 80%, but the black population is on the rise. It's about 20% of the population. So let's jump ahead another 10 generations. And we see that the black population is starting to increase. It's at about 30%, whereas the brown population is down to 70%. So there must be something in this environment that gives that black furred mouse a survival advantage. Let's jump ahead another 10 generations, and now we're at 40% of the population brown and 60% black. So we can see that even though this is a single gene trait, that natural selection can influence how many individuals will have these particular traits. If it's a good variation, they'll reproduce more often and their percentages go up. If it's a bad variation, they'll reproduce less frequently and their percentages will go down. Remember, a polygenic trait, though, is controlled by many genes. And if we were to graph any polygenic trait, we get a nice bell-shaped curve. Looks kind of like this one, where we could put the phenotype on the X, the number of individuals on the Y. An example of this is height. Here we see a picture from a college biology class. And in this photo, all the men are wearing blue sweatshirts and the women are wearing white sweatshirts. And they're arranged by height on the football field. So we can see the population of males and females. Notice that males are typically taller than females are, but certainly if you look real closely, there's a 6-foot female that's in that 6-foot row. But when we graph that, it's a nice bell-shaped curve. Again, it's a polygenic trait. So natural selection can affect phenotypes in one of three ways. There's something called directional selection. This is when individuals at one end of the curve have a higher fitness than at the other end or in the middle. So for instance, let's say we were looking at finches, and we're going to be doing this in class, where we look at the average beak size. Scientists have been going to the Galapagos Islands for years doing this exact study. What they find is that on rainy years and the seeds are larger, the beak size increases. And so over time, the graph, although it's still a bell curve, might look something more like this. So if this was the average beak size before, the average beak size is getting larger. Why? Because those with the smaller beaks are being selected against, those with the larger beaks are being selected for. But in drier years, just the opposite happens. Where sometimes, it's a pretty bad bell curve, but sometimes the average might get smaller in size. So natural selection is selecting for either the larger beaks or the smaller beaks, depending on what type of food is present. The second type is called stabilizing selection. Here, the individuals near the center of the curve have a higher fitness than those on the ends. So again, with these finches, sometimes the seeds are a certain size where the big beak birds, they just can't get enough seeds to survive. The small beak birds have too small of a beak to be able to get at the seeds. And so we would have a bell curve that might look something more like this, where the individuals, most of the individuals are somewhere in the middle. Once you start getting to the extremes, the population decreases dramatically. And in the third type, this is known as disruptive selection. Here, individuals at the outer ends of the curve have a higher fitness than those in the middle. So in other words, those smaller beak birds have a greater fitness, The ones with the average size did not, but then the ones with the higher beak birds also had a greater chance at survival. And so this is really kind of like two bell curves combined together, where nature is selecting for those on the outer edges. And so that's all this is. We're going to be taking a look at the finch beak data in class, and I can't wait to see you then.